Let's get into one of the big stories of the week, Project Veritas. So, Project Veritas had their. This is messed up. This is legitimately screwed up. Project Veritas had their offices raided by the FBI. Some Project Veritas employees had their homes raided by the FBI, apparently because Project Veritas allegedly had Ashley Biden's diary, which they never released, and they couldn't authenticate it. But nonetheless, the FBI came banging down their doors under the guise of getting back Ashley Biden's diary, when in fact, it more so looks like they're just persecuting their political enemies. We're going to read a little bit of this article in the New York Times, and then we're going to talk about what it means that this article appeared in the New York Times. Adrian, I'm doing this off the cuff, okay? I'm doing it off the cuff. That's all it is. Yes, it was not a perfect explanation of the null hypothesis. I was not expecting to have to explain it. All right. Project Veritas and the line between journalism and political spying. Documents show how the conservative group worked with lawyers to gauge how far its deceptive reporting practices could go before running afoul of federal laws. Now, as we're reading this article, what I want you guys to think about is the New York Times doing exactly what it accuses Project Veritas of doing? Is this a case of SJWs always project? Anything that comes out of their mouth that they try to use against you is in fact just talking about what they're doing to you? Let's read a little bit. We're not going to read the whole thing. Hours after FBI agents searched the homes of two former Project Veritas operatives last week, James O'Keefe, the leader of the conservative group, took to YouTube to defend its work as the stuff of responsible, ethical journalism. We never break the law, he said. Ooh, I just misgendered James O'Keefe. We never break the law, he said, railing against the FBI's investigation into members of his group for possible involvement in the reported theft of a diary kept by President Biden's daughter, Ashley. In fact, one of our ethical rules is to act as though there are 12 jurors on our shoulders at all times. Project Veritas has long occupied a gray area between investigative journalism and political spying, and internal documents obtained by the New York Times reveal the extent to which the group has worked with its lawyer to gauge how far its deceptive reporting practices can go before running afoul of federal laws. Now, I'm going to pause right there, because does it seem to anyone else like the New York Times is a little bit indignant about the fact that Project Veritas is making sure it doesn't break the law? Call me crazy, but I thought that the purpose of having a corporate lawyer was to be able to consult with that lawyer to make sure that you don't break the law. Why is the New York Times being like, damn Project Veritas, damn them, consulting with lawyers to make sure they're behaving legally? Why is that a bad thing? That is the entire purpose of a corporate lawyer. Anyway, I digress. That's not really the point of this. Let's keep going, read a little bit more. The documents, a series of memos written by the group's lawyer, details ways for Project Veritas sting operations, which typically diverge from standard journalistic practice by employing people who mask their real identities or create fake ones to infiltrate target organizations to avoid breaking federal statutes, such as lying to government officials. The documents show, for example, Project Veritas' operatives' concern that an operation launched in 2018 to secretly record employees at the FBI, Justice Department, and other agencies in hope of exposing bias against President Donald J. Trump might violate the Espionage Act, the law passed at the height of World War I that has typically been used to prosecute spies. Now, here's my question. Why does the New York Times have this? Why does the New York Times have these memos? Isn't the New York Times in releasing James O'Keefe's private, privileged communications with his lawyers? Isn't the New York Times doing precisely the same thing it's accusing Project Veritas of? Oh, but it gets worse than that. It gets worse than that. Mike Cernovich, I've got a few tweets pulled up here from people who were talking about this that I respect. Mike Cernovich says earlier today, this was on November 11th, earlier today, a federal judge ordered the FBI to stop removing files from Project Veritas's device. In response to this order, the FBI leaked attorney-client privilege communication from those devices to the New York Times. So let's just think about this for a second. The FBI raids Project Veritas's offices and the homes of several employees, including James O'Keefe, takes James O'Keefe's phone, starts going through James O'Keefe's phone, to the point where a federal judge tells them, stop going through his phone, and the FBI is so pissed that they then leak the contents of James O'Keefe's phone to the New York Times, who then publishes an article saying Project Veritas has long occupied a gray area between investigative journalism and political spying. What is the New York Times doing? Seems a little bit like political spying to me. We've also got Liz Wheeler weighing in here. Project Veritas sues the New York Times. Oh, yes, by the way, P.S. All of this is going on as Project Veritas is engaged in an active lawsuit against the New York Times. I'm sure that's just a coincidence. I'm sure that's just, it just magically appeared that way. Sometimes the universe just works out that way, Sure. The FBI raids James O'Keefe's home. The New York Times knows about the raid immediately. The FBI steals James O'Keefe's reporter notes. The New York Times publishes what his notes were. This is nuts. The FBI is leaking O'Keefe's privileged info to the New York Times. Hello, deep state. And then we've got Will Chamberlain. And Will, guys, if you're not following Will on Twitter, you really need to. Because when stuff like this comes out, Will is one of the people whose opinion I really want to hear. Because he's a lawyer and he's a really smart dude. And he always gives a balanced opinion. If Will is upset about something, then I take that as just cause that I should probably be paying attention to this. He is a person you want to follow. He's a person you want to listen to, even when you don't like what he's telling you. Will was talking about, with all the election stuff leading up to January 6th, Will was one of the few people saying conservatives ain't nothing going to happen. Ain't nothing going to change the election results. And the people that were listening to him knew what was coming. The people who were not listening to him and were re-reading all over how it's not possible that Joe Biden's going to be president. They weren't listening to guys like Will who were telling them the truth, even when they didn't want to hear it. Will's take on it is this. The FBI raided Project Veritas on a pretext and is now leaking their privileged communication to the New York Times. This is a scandal. These are classic privileged communications. Project Veritas asked for a legal opinion on potential journalistic activities. That opinion is a privileged communication. No idea what Adam Goldman at the New York Times was thinking here. He should be subpoenaed tomorrow and forced to reveal his criminal source. I didn't even think about the fact that Project Veritas is currently in litigation with the New York Times. Makes it all the more appalling that the New York Times will be publishing Veritas's privileged communication. If the New York Times has these memorandums, why wouldn't it also have Project Veritas's privileged communications that directly relate to Project Veritas's lawsuit against the Times? This is just a massive, massive scandal. The New York Times, Delinea EST, this isn't journalism, this is straight up theft, and he keeps going there. Will is not happy. But you know who else wasn't happy? Shockingly, the ACLU. You know how bad this scandal is with the New York Times and Project Veritas? Do you know how bad this scandal is? The ACLU just today, like an hour ago, came out to the defense of Project Veritas. Now, it may not look like it's a defense at first because the ACLU, the ACLU is like gritting their teeth through this. The ACLU did not want to write this statement, I'll tell you that. But it is a defense of Project Veritas. Let's read what the ACLU had to say. The following is a statement from Brian House, senior staff attorney with ACLU's Speech Privacy and Technology Project, in response to reports of an FBI raid on Project Veritas founder James O'Keefe. Now, they start out with a little dig. They do. You need to get over the dig that they start out this paragraph with. Project Veritas has engaged in disgraceful deceptions, and reasonable observers might not consider their activities to be journalism at all. Nevertheless, the precedent set in this case could have serious consequences for press freedom unless the government has good reason to believe that Project Veritas employees were directly involved in the criminal theft of a diary. It should not have subjected them to invasive searches and seizures. We urge the court to appoint a special master to ensure that law enforcement officers review only the materials that were lawfully seized and that were directly relevant to a legitimate criminal investigation. Guys, if the ACLU of all organizations, the wokest of the woke, the organization that has fallen so far from grace, this situation is bad if the ACLU is taking Project Veritas' side. And again, you have to ignore the dig. They had to do that. But they were like, ugh! But it's a good thing. It's a good thing. The ACLU, for once, maybe there is, I want to take an optimistic look here. Maybe there is just a glimmer, just a tiny little sliver of a hope that the ACLU could actually, follow its principles every once in a while. At least, maybe I'm reading too much into it. I tend to give too much of the benefit of the doubt sometimes. Sometimes I see like a small thing. I'm like, yes, this thing went right. This is how it's supposed to work. Maybe it'll be the only thing that happens correctly, but I have to give the ACLU credit for this. It was exactly the right thing.